Assetto Corsa Evo just had 2 new cars and a track added to it, so in this video I'm going to tell you what I thought about it after 12 hours of testing. Are the cars good? Is the track fun? Where's Evo going? Please Kunos stop sending me horse heads in the post. And on an important but unrelated note, I can confirm the Meteor is heading towards Birmingham. Get in there, Meteor, we all believe that you can do it. Join the thousands of beautiful women that have already subscribed to this channel and subscribe to it yourself to then find out that we weren't telling the truth and then unsubscribe. Also, click the like button. So let's get straight to the point here because I don't want to waste your time, though I already have by saying that I don't want to waste your time. I've done it again. So let's begin by talking about the track that's been added, Fuji Speedway. And I have to say, it's a really nice track model, really nice details. I don't think you can really be that critical of the tracks in Assetto Corsa Evo. If you're going to complain about anything, it's really not the track models. Though I think some people have said the track models look like they've been taken out of ACC. Well, the tracks that are in ACC and Evo. But I think the tracks actually stand out by themselves. And they have absolutely fantastic details. And most importantly, you'll be glad to know that Kunos have continued with the Noodleman placement. I was really worried that they might stop and not keep them, but Fuji is littered with them. There's one right there on the hillside. Oh, I just start crying every time I see them. Absolutely beautiful. But you do have the crowds, the grandstands, and they do feel really fleshed out. They don't feel barren. It feels like there's another Noodleman. Look at it dance. It feels like you're at a big event, you know, something's taking place, and a lot of sims have that kind of barren feel to them. So I think that's really, really good. Look at that one. It's really good that Kunos have done that. Now, it might be at the sacrifice to performance at the moment, and early access. Oh, tiny little one in the corner. Early access, can't complain. I'm sure in the future they will optimise things more, but I really do like this. Oh, the one down the right, don't miss it. I really like the details and that feeling of being at an event. Also, it's really worth noting with the track textures, they've done a really good job on the road surface and road surface details that help give a great sense of speed. Fuji's not too bad for that, it's quite good, but Bathurst, the mountain, is particularly good for having a very nice sense of speed due to the texture work that's on that road surface. It's something I think a lot of people don't notice, but it's really worth calling attention to. And also those track textures and road surface details are really good references for where you are on the track, where you're positioned, where you should brake, and I think they do a great job on that. The newer game engine in Evo also means that the shaders they have for the road surface pick up the light nicely and highlight the road details. So there are some benefits to using DirectX 12 super advanced modern engines, though granted many of those advantages go to Nvidia shareholders. But if you've wasted lots of money on a graphics card, enjoy the shiny road surface. Now, lots of people pointed out that Mount Fuji, the famous volcano this track's next to, was a little bit blurry, and that Kunos have not done a very good job on the texture details of the mountains in the distance. Now, I have to let you guys know that this is actually an example of Kunos' insane attention to detail that we're all used to with their tracks and their other titles. And what happened was when they were laser scanning this circuit, unfortunately there was a beautiful topless Japanese lady climbing up the side of the mountain, and due to Kunos being so culturally sensitive and authentic to Japanese culture, they decided to blur the entire mountain. So really, again, a really great attention to detail from Kunos, and I really felt like I was having an authentic Japanese experience whilst going around this racetrack. So I think the track and other tracks in this title look absolutely fantastic. Though, you will have noticed we had quite a bit of stutter issues with that footage, and I noticed after this update we were having far more problems with Evo compared to even the launch version in terms of the game crashing, the game being reluctant to be recorded with OBS, and random stutter issues that we did manage to dial down and fix by just arbitrarily messing with settings, restarting the game multiple times. but it was very noticeable that this is a really in-development title with a lot of annoying sort of issues that you're probably better off just waiting out as a consumer rather than fiddling with and wasting your time to get it to actually work decently. But we got to Bathurst with the Lamborghini, and we could talk about the handling of this car because we did quite a few laps with it, and I have to say, I think this car was really quite drivable. Like, the actual general handling of it was really quite satisfying from a raw physics perspective. Turn the traction control off. You'll need to bind to TC and the controls to do that. And it's just super easy to drive this car. It's a little bit floaty in some ways, and it's a very progressive, wide slip to the handling. Even if you try the different tyres on it, there's 3 different sets of tyres that you can drive with this, but all of them are like monstrously forgiving. That's not necessarily unrealistic. There's a misconception that a lot of sim racers have that real cars are all insanely hard to drive, whereas actually a lot of real cars are basically toys sold to rich people that are terrible drivers who want to think they're good drivers. So actually they should be very easy to drive in a simulator as well. But yes, this car was really nice and easy to drive, a little bit slidey, you could massively overdrive it, but generally speaking, quite fun dynamics from a physics side of things. I can see like dialing it down and then trying to be faster with it. There's a good amount of range to how you can drive this vehicle. Responds nice on the throttle, or it moves nice on the throttle, moves nice on the brake. Way better than vehicles in Gran Turismo, for example, or Forza, and doesn't have like the turn-off physics at the limit that iRacing has. However, despite it being very drivable and not a bad car in a general gaming sense, and maybe not even unrealistic in many ways, what did really stand out is that it just feels very dull to drive. And I don't mean it's a road car compared to a race car. Like, obviously a road car's quite heavy, race cars are really light and agile, and road cars are quite sloppy. It's just, that's what happens with mass. It's just dull and sort of like honey-like to drive. It's like everything's a bit in slow motion. If you drive sort of somewhat comparable cars to this in the original AC or other simulators, or AMS1, or just other well-respected simulators, RBR, I don't think there's a car like this in RBR, but the general physics in other simulators tend to just be sharper, more precise, more immediate, and they still also have a lot of the dynamics that you'd expect. Unfortunately, you guys won't have played The Last Garage, which is a simulator in development. It's not even publicly available, but that has a vintage hatchback in it, which is an old car, quite sloppy, quite slidey. But at no point driving that was I like, oh, this is dull and disconnected. It felt super tight, super connected, and though the car was very slidey, very responsive. And that is kind of the feeling that I'm missing in Evo. It's like you're driving in honey. Now, I think a large part of that is still the force feedback and how lacking in detail the force feedback is. Now, with this car, the force feedback does describe the rear coming out. You can feel it load up on braking. You can feel there is some range to this car. It's not the worst car in Evo, but it's just so devoid of real information for the subtle stuff that's potentially going on, that I think that is a large part of what makes this feel so sort of dull. Dull is the word. Like, when I was driving this, though I think the physics are way better than Forza and Gran Turismo, the feeling I got in this is it kind of has that kind of console-y dullness to it, to the driving, despite having quite a lot of depth clearly to the physics. It's kind of analogous to that feeling you get when you play video games. If you were to put VSync on at like 60 Hz or something, that visual experience of that kind of sluggishness that you experience at 60 Hz VSync, that is kind of what this feels like, but it's in the sort of innate handling and physics and what's going on with the sim. Stuff just feels a bit muted, slow to respond. It's like driving a car with your hands in honey. But not the worst experience. I could see a lot of people having fun driving this. I could totally see if you've not played AMS1, Richard Burns Rally, AC1, and you're not used to like really sharp and maybe overly sharp and overly responsive simulators, or even flight simulators that are very pokey, precise and sharp. If you're not used to that, then maybe you'll be like, oh, this is great, it's another fantastic video game with fun mechanics to drive from. So that's the handling of the car. It didn't excite me, but I could see how it could be enjoyable to do online races or as part of a single player career mode. The actual car cockpit, the car graphics, and even the audio, to me, all fine, absolutely fantastic. I'm sure you've got better cars out there that look nicer in other games, but to me, the graphics years ago passed the threshold of anything that makes me go, this is not immersive to drive. Kunos have always, again, done an absolutely superb job with the actual car models and itty-bitty details that even some developers like Forza just completely ignore. Kunos clearly employ absolutely incredible 3D artists and people that have too much of an attraction to vehicle details. But, you know, that's nice that you know with this game you're going to get really high detailed cars. Now, as for the Lancia Delta, normally I really love this type of car. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, square cars, it's better than a bendy car, isn't it? Just look at the edges of this vehicle. And then all-wheel drive, absolutely ridiculous. You can just hoon this around corners, and if you have any trouble, just put your foot on the accelerator and it will recover from anything. I think this car will be superb for online races. Just because it's a ridiculous vehicle, and hopefully they have good netcode in Evo so that you can have a bit of door banging. It'll be top-notch fun for racing. But it has to be said again, it just feels really dull to drive. The force feedback, there is a little bit of stuff there telling you what the car's doing. It's very easy to drive. It's very drivable, but it's just, again, so monstrously sluggish. To be clear, I'm not expecting this to be a race car. I'm not expecting this to be a car that's on super amazing suspension and at maximum performance and has everything taken out of it, so it's really light. Even as a road car, it's just monstrously dull to drive. And though it has the character, many aspects of what you'd expect of this type of vehicle, and though the general grip envelope of how this car drives seems quite convincing. Look at this recovery. Full throttle. Perfect. Well, all vehicles should have all-wheel drive. Like, it's not floating around the track like Automobilista 2's crazy physics, and the tyres aren't turning off over the limit. It's like a lot of the physics are there, and the general behaviour is sort of correct, and in many ways better than other sims, but it's just so sort of sluggish. And like driving, again, as I say, with your hands in honey. Obviously part of that's the force feedback, but I think the physics are like that as well. The way the cars also come out of slides and don't seem to want to have that really sort of snappy poise when you're on an all-wheel drive, like a slide, or when you're drifting. Same with the other car. When you're in a drift and a slide, it's like the cars want to just automatically come out of it. Now, obviously, there's lots of car settings that can contribute to that, and who knows what they've done with their settings, and, you know. But even with a completely butchered car setup, with many other simulators, or sims that are particularly good for drifting, the original Live for Speed, Richard Burns Rally, the original Assetto Corsa, even with butchered setups, even with cars that aren't drift cars, like Formula cars and things, they still have that sort of bit of poise to them. And you notice this with lots of real-world cars. When you're in an all-wheel drive slide, there's a kind of bizarre stability that occurs. I don't know why that happens, but there's also like this sort of manipulation the driver can do that's quite precise and requires quite responsive fast steering inputs, and you know, you can just really balance things. This doesn't really seem to want that with anything in this simulator. It's all like slow motion driving, honey driving. So and that lack of crispness and physics clarity and sharpness, that to me is what's the reflection of my view on these vehicles. Despite car model being great, I quite like the audio, and as again I say, to be clear, I think it's not the worst out of all games, and I think it can still be very fun. It's just, you know, Kunos set a bar very high for themselves with the original AC, and the bar is very high from games like Live for Speed, Richard Burns Rally, Automobilista 1, and it's only fair to compare this to what are the greatest simulators that ever existed, rather than comparing it to Gran Turismo and Forza and where the low bar is now with a lot of titles on the market. So it's a nice content drop if people were happy with Evo as it is now and are just following along its process. New track, new cars, can't really complain. Early access. They did say in the update that they've improved AI paths to some extent. I noticed AI doing crazy dive bombs and still being a bit rubbish. So I don't think I'd really play this for the single player as it is now. We also had some issues still with the online connection. The game is very unstable for me. Sometimes it's stable for a while and then it goes into craziness, and then it seems like there's some weird issues requiring a PC reboot to get things working again. So it's like it is a very sort of pre-alpha title. It's not something... I'm sure you can have fun with this. There'll be a lot of people that do have fun with this, but it's very much a game that's in development, and I think very much stretching the boundaries of what early access is typically used for, or what people typically expect from early access. So keep that in mind if you're still thinking about buying this. Yes, I think so. In terms of Evo, I am cautiously optimistic that by the end of the year, I think we might have a good, fun game to play. I can see how it could be really nice and enjoyable, but the more I spend on this, the more I'm sort of feeling like this is probably going to end up being a fun game and quite a realistic game, still a simulator, but I don't think it's not tickling my sim pickle in the way that Richard Burns Rally does, or the way that Automobilista 1 did, or Netcar Pro, or AC, or GTR 2. You know, it's not hitting that same spot, or even the same way that X-Plane 11 or DCS does. It's not hitting that spot. It just feels it's hitting more of a, it'll be fun with gameplay, it'll be fun online, and I'm sure it'll be popular, and it's not probably going to be bad. But that's a different thing, isn't it, to what we all hope for the glory of Kunos and the glory of the Church of Force feedback, which is filled with those legendary simulators. That's what we would like to. We would like to bring Evo into the church, the crypt, but it just can't come in at the moment, I'm afraid. Early access, can't complain. So yeah. Worth giving it a bash if you haven't. I wouldn't recommend fiddling around with it too much, and I wouldn't buy this right now. I would wait for more updates, probably 6 months at least, if you're someone that values your free time. But you can see that Kunos have put a lot of work into it. It's a good job by Kunos. As I always say, I really appreciate developers like Reza, Kunos, pretty much most of sim developers, motorsport games as well. They do put a lot of work into these things, and they're very small teams compared to what you get with monstrous AAA title developers. So appreciate all their work. Let's see where things go in the future. But that is it for this update review on Evo version 0.1.6. Till the next one, thanks for watching. Take care, happy tea drinking, and goodbye.